So today's episode is extra special, and I know I say some variation of that every time, and I mean it every time, but this one is a little bit different because it's the first episode we've done where I get to do it with someone who's genuinely a friend of mine, but also has been a client. And the reason why I'm so looking forward to this conversation is because it's one of the most important topics in the female health world, in my opinion. We haven't done an episode on it yet, which is obviously a shame, but I couldn't think of a better way of doing it rather than bringing an expert on to kind of talk more about the science of this, because with this topic in particular, it's very much about the mindset and psychology of why we lost the menstrual cycle in the first place, what made you decide to want to get it back, what made you be okay with getting it back, and the potential negatives that come with that. So that's why having this conversation in this way with yourself today, Victoria, from a client perspective rather than like the science of what we're going to be talking about, I think is really, really powerful. So we obviously did the lesson in my course for personal trainers, which I really appreciate. It was a few years ago now, so it was a lot more recent to what you were going through, and I know you've listened to that back and there's some interesting reflections, and I can't wait to hear those from you. So yeah, thank you so much for being here today. As I kind of alluded to, we're talking about hypothalamic amenorrhea, so the loss of the menstrual cycle. And yeah, over to you, Victoria.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to join you. And yes, God, it feels like a whole lifetime ago that we did that lesson. And as you were saying, I was trying to listen to some of that back, and it feels like it was actually a different life. So yeah, I just want that at the very beginning to be a point to anyone listening to this who is going through it, to know that there is a way out the other side. And it's not always an easy journey, but it's definitely a possible one.
Yeah, I love that. That's such a beautiful place to start. So if we go obviously right back, we were kind of friends anyway. I was in Thailand at the time, and you reached out and were like, hey, like this is what's been going on, right? So I think to go right back to the beginning for anyone listening, we probably need to talk a little bit around where you were maybe in your life that resulted in you losing your menstrual cycle, if possible. Is probably, a great place to start.
Of course. So again, it feels like such a long time ago now. So at the time, I was working within the fashion and modelling industry. I had recently graduated from university, and I think I was consumed with this idea of an aesthetic. So I was surrounded by magazine shoots, articles and people looking a certain way, and I just got all consumed. I was overtraining and under-eating for a really, really long time. And that did, in fact, lead me to losing my menstrual cycle, which changed my whole life. It didn't just have an impact on my periods. It changed everything. It changed my mindset and also other physical outcomes as well, such as really bad acne and a lot of other things. So, yeah, I think I just got consumed by what we would probably now call diet culture and media and marketing within the fitness space.
I think that's, thank you for sharing that. I know it can obviously feel quite vulnerable, but so many women are there. Like, it is really common. I know we've been speaking about how a lot of these things now to you seem obvious, and it seems crazy that that's how you used to think. That's even how you used to like look and speak. So yeah, for some of those women listening that maybe are where you are, they haven't had a menstrual cycle. What were some of the other maybe like downsides or negatives that were occurring in your life as a result of that? So maybe they can relate.
Of course. So I think losing your period is the obvious one, obviously, but that comes with so many other physical and mental side effects. So at first, I think we were once saying I almost celebrated that. So it's a bit like when we speak about the pill and people are like, oh, I take the pill, I'm skipping periods, or they're on some other form of contraception, such as the implant, and they almost celebrate not having their period because it's amazing. It's 6 months without having to worry about it. But that was fine for the first few months, and then I realised I wasn't getting it back, and then I started to worry. I was like, okay, what is this doing to my body? So that's when I saw other changes that the hormones would cause, such as acne, which opened a whole host of other like mental worries, the way that my skin was looking alongside not having a period. I then had to worry about these two things that at the time I never knew was linked, but it just seemed like it was like a big spiral rolling out of control.
You touched on earlier about kind of how education played a pretty pivotal role in just like understanding how some of these things were linked and knowing that it's not normal. So yeah, maybe you touch on that a little bit if that's okay. Like, what were some of the messages you were hearing, or who were some of the people talking about this that enabled you to reflect upon that situation and go, yeah, maybe this isn't right?
Of course. So, well, you were my coach at the time, so I will always, I would feel really lucky to have met you and for you to have trained me through that. It was a shame actually in the education space that I was missing any advice from my doctor. So my doctor basically turned around to me and said, you should take the pill. It'll help your periods come back. And as I'm sure many other people out there do, and as my friends say to me when they are missing periods, they're saying, oh, I'm actually going to go on the pill because the doctor said it would encourage a bleed. That was the first person that I reached to for education, and that was almost the education that I followed until I realised that didn't quite feel right. So first stop was to speak to my doctor, and that's the exact advice that I was given. And then I came to see you, and I learned a lot more about the cycle, and that's when it all changed. So I spoke to you about what was happening, and you explained that not only was I missing my period, but that was going to then have an impact on obviously my abilities to reproduce, but other things as well. So I am not an expert, and I won't claim to be, but things such as, you know, my muscle mass, my mental state, which was so huge. So education really changed this for me, not only knowing what was happening to my body during that time, but also knowing that it was having an impact on all other parts of my life as well. So my mindset and also my social life.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think that the doctor one's always like kind of hurts to hear, because obviously everyone has some variation of that story, which is really sad. And I always kind of think like I'd love to just know why. Like it's just, there's no like caveats or contacts. It's just, yeah, point blank, not true. I mean, the one slight caveat to it for anyone listening is, whilst the statement being on the pill will get your periods back is point blank not true, part of the reason for suggesting it is at least the synthetic version of estrogen will help with the potential loss of bone density when you don't have a period. However, that is a super band-aid solution, and it's never really communicated that way. It is go on the pill, it will get your periods back, which, yeah, potentially being on the pill is better than not having periods, but really you want to focus on getting them back properly rather than kind of putting a plaster over it. So yeah, you mentioned that it didn't feel right, and I think that's really interesting because, I mean, ultimately you've kind of spoke to your doctor who was a medical professional, you've went, that didn't feel right. So my kind of question is like, what about it didn't feel right? So I'm really interested to hear that. And then we've obviously had a conversation, and from anyone on the outside looking in, like kind of questioning your doctor to then come and speak to a male coach, then maybe doesn't make sense, right? Like that's not the next logical jump of where to go. I know it was a bit different here because we were already friends and you're looking at my content, but yeah, I'd love to hear your kind of thoughts on that, because I don't think I've ever really asked you that question. Like, what about your doctor giving you that advice didn't feel quite right for you?
I think there was two things. So first of all, it's instinct, and as a female, you know that you're supposed to have that period every month. Right. So at first I was like, hold on, if I'm not having that period, why would I unnaturally induce that? I really was sure that I wanted to get to the root cause of this. And the second thing with the doctor came when they also suggested the same thing for my acne. They said, go on a pill and it will remove your acne, which again, medically might actually be how it works. I know that it is widely used, but for them to advise the same thing for two problems that I was experiencing at one time felt really strange. So that's when I started doing my own research, and that was the turning point for me. I started looking into female health and acne and skin health alongside each other, and that's when I found more information on exactly what a period was, why I was having it, and the reasons that I should be having a period. And then I started to understand further, working alongside yourself and my own research, that I needed to be having a period for a whole wealth of other reasons apart from just reproduction. So I think it comes down to questioning what feels right for you in your gut and what you think is the right thing for you to be doing with your body, and then taking a step further to educate yourself. The only way I got out of this was through education, through looking into education and resources myself, but also working alongside a coach who knew what they were talking about when it comes to female health. And I think that is so huge. And in the fitness space in general, we are all taught to move more, to eat better, to do more, to work out more. And sometimes that just isn't the right answer, especially when it comes to women. And I really am so passionate about ensuring that coaches out there really work to ensure they know the female body, because we are not, as you once told me, little men.
I love that. I can't take credit for that saying. A slightly different version of that was Dr. Stacey Sims. But yeah, I love that. Thank you so much. That's a whole slightly different angle that I'd love to unpack with you in a few minutes. But just going back to where you were kind of at before we started working together, was there like one specific moment that you remember being like, enough's enough here, or there was a bit of a light bulb moment in terms of a bit of education where you were like, right, I'm going to make a change, I'm going to get this back? Or was it just kind of an accumulation of these symptoms and education like trickling in?
There is a one light bulb moment that actually kind of haunts me, but it was a turning point for me. And it was sat in a fertility clinic in London that I took myself to without anyone knowing. I couldn't afford it. I took out a loan, and it was at a point when I was so scared. I had no idea. I couldn't read my own bloods. I had no idea what was happening in my body. And it was at the point where I just realised that I may have ruined the chances to reproduce. And that scared me beyond anything. So I took out a loan, I booked an appointment, I brought myself to London, and sitting there in a waiting room full of people with similar concerns, whether they were on their own or with their partners, was the moment I decided this was it. I think I was about 24 or 25, so maybe just before, and I knew that I didn't want to be back in this place in 5 years. So that was the turning point for me. It was then, and I also had to go to other appointments in hospital, and it was when it got that far that I was having brain scans, I was at fertility clinics. That was the turning point.
Hey, it's Leo here, just very quickly interrupting this podcast episode to share with you a really exciting announcement. The Nexus team are now available to take on new one-on-one online nutrition clients. So if you're interested in working with myself or anyone on the team for your nutrition, health or body composition based goals, then follow the link in the show notes and you can see all of the information on what that might look like to work with us. I think it takes a lot of courage to care about your health at 24, 25, because I think a lot of people take their health for granted at that age. They just think it's a given right. I'm still in my 20s. They often think that this is not something that should go wrong until more like my 30s or 40s. And I think that that's often, not to go off on a tangent, but that is often relevant for guys, right? It's more like your 30s or your 40s. The difference is we're not stuck on hormonal birth control in our teens. We aren't then stuck on maybe like an acne-based drug like Accutane. We're not like putting all these additional chemicals into our body. We probably aren't, what's the word I'm looking for, like susceptible to diet culture. So of course by 25 the female body's often had quite a few years of stress, which is not good. So yeah, I think it takes a lot of courage to look into your health from that perspective at like 24, 25. But to touch on that though, because obviously for a lot of people listening, fertility won't be like a concern, at least for them right now or potentially ever. And I know you said something earlier which I thought was really interesting around how I think a few of your friends have said to you, I don't care that I don't have a period because I'm not really interested in kids ever. And again, I know you've said and you've never claimed to obviously be an expert on that at all, but what are some of the reasons why people maybe should care about having that period even if they don't care about being fertile? Like what are some of the other side effects that, I mean, I know you've touched on some, but what are some of the other side effects that you had or that you now know, you even if you didn't experience them, some of the other side effects that you can start to experience as a woman who doesn't have a cycle? Sure.
So I think physiologically, I hear a lot, I work a lot with fitness professionals and all about, you know, I don't know if I'm even going to say this right, but muscle mass, bone density and feeling strong. I felt so weak. I look back to how I felt back then and yeah, everything felt so weak and I felt out of sync with myself as a woman. I think if you have an understanding of your cycle as a female, you kind of know how you're going to feel at a certain part of the month. So whether that's, I don't know, a bit angry, a bit hormonal, or just, you know, very happy and feeling great. You don't have that when you don't have the cycle. And I think that's interesting because, again, I'll pass it over to you to know the science on it, but you just kind of lose a sense of yourself and you just feel a bit weak, a bit misunderstood. I just felt a bit lost. And yeah, I think weak was probably the best word to describe that. And beyond that, I think socially, I felt a bit strange. I felt really uncomfortable having conversations with other females about their periods, knowing I wasn't having one. I remember being in a social situation once and someone saying to me, oh, for goodness sake, I've just had my period. And I was sat there longing and just hoping that next month I would get my period. So yeah, I think between the physical impact and the emotional impact it had on the whole of my life, I would say it really impacted both. And yeah, social occasions were really difficult. Yeah,
that's a great answer. Thank you for sharing that. Pleasure. I think one of my favourite quotes on how important the menstrual cycle is, but it's actually now recognised as your fifth vital sign, which is really cool. But initially that was just like a kind of a tagline, like your menstrual cycle should be your fifth vital sign, whether you have one or not. And for a lot of people listening, it maybe feels quite crazy to be having this conversation because it's not common. It's not a common conversation to have. It's not common for coaches to ask like clients if they're having a cycle or not. So it's like we're not screening our clients, that they're coming to us like without a menstrual cycle, but also sometimes having a fat loss goal, because menstrual cycle regularity and body fat percentage are not necessarily correlated. So it's like they're coming to us with a fat loss goal, but they haven't got a cycle. But we don't ask that question. So then we're just making their health even worse by putting them in a calorie deficit and having that additional stress on the body. So for anyone listening that's like, bit of not an odd conversation, but like it's not the norm yet. It's just because we are very early on that adoption curve, in my opinion, and it will become a lot more normal over the next few years.
I think that's something I'm really passionate about, and actually the reason I started the job that I do now. So it's just introducing these conversations and making them normal. I'm now surrounded by so many amazing people in this space, especially the female health space, that speak about this so normally. We speak about periods, vulvas, vaginas, everything, and it is so important that we're talking about these things. And even like you say, that guys are more aware of these. If you've got a partner or you live with females, I'm sure you're fully aware that sometimes they might flip off the handle really easily, and just understanding the way that we function is so important and can really change relationships, whether that's between clients and coaches or just the people in your lives, your family and your friends. So it's definitely a conversation we should be having more of, and if you ever need anyone to shout about it, I'm always here.
Yeah, I love that. I know that this is not necessarily something in a way you even want to do in terms of being on a podcast talking about it, so I'm genuinely so grateful that you're here having this conversation.
It's a pleasure to speak about it if it's going to help people. And I think that was a really big driver for this journey and actually the healing that I did. If I knew that if I could get over it, then I can then speak for other people in the same position. So yeah, that is one of the big drivers. When I was sat there, I remember so vividly, I was in hospital for a brain scan, and I sat there and I was just like, I don't want to experience this, but more importantly, I really don't want younger girls to experience this. So if I can say anything, it's just that if you are experiencing this, please reach out for the help that you need, because there is a place at the end. It just takes a little while to get there.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. I think because it wasn't a difficult journey in terms of like you being a client. You're actually an amazing client. The biggest thing from being a client, right, is communication. The more you communicate and the more open and honest you are, the easier it is to coach. Like that's so important. But it wasn't obviously an easy journey for you in terms of having to make your peace and accept potentially upping calories, potentially gaining a little bit of body fat. I know you said to me earlier you watched the video back when we taught the lesson in the course, which was really just coming out the other end of it. And obviously you are a little bit leaner, you look a little bit different. So like now that you're reflecting on this journey, it maybe took us 6 months or so to get your menstrual cycle back. What would you say are like your main reflections? Like, does it feel kind of crazy to sit here and think that was you and you went through that? Like, how do you feel now?
It feels like another person completely. I look at those photos and beyond the fact they terrify me slightly, I just feel in a completely different headspace. And I think that is what is so important in this, what I would call recovery journey from this is, yeah, it feels like a whole life ago, but there's so many things that are important parts of the stages. So overall, it was just education. So education about your body and what's going on, increasing my own education about the female systems and what periods were and how I could support myself in getting one back was first. But the big piece was on mindset, and more so the social pressures that are put on us, the beauty standards that we are placed under, and diet culture are three of huge things I'm so passionate about changing, because ultimately that was the driving force behind what I experienced. There was a lot of stresses as well, which I think we touched on when you were coaching me, of how to remove stress and physical stress in my life and mental stress. But ultimately this was driven by a decision that I made to change my body, and I don't want anyone else to feel that way. So I think the big takeaway would be start at the very beginning and really, whilst you're working with a coach, do the mindset work, because that is ultimately what will change the outcome. You can spend all the time in the world getting it back and then you've got your cycle back, but the steps that you take after that to address the reason you lost it in the first place is really the most important ones.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. I want to like very quick tangents at this point. I feel like it'd actually be super relevant to plug Kat's episode now you've said that. So for anyone that's not listened, Kat is one of our Nexus coaches, so you can work with her. She's amazing. She's got a degree in neuroscience amongst many other qualifications in the counselling, therapy, mindset space. And her podcast episode was, I've now forgotten that off the top of my head, I want to say around number 12 or 13, but we'll stick that specifically in the show notes. But her episode would be fantastic for anyone that's just listened to Victoria's answer there and said, yeah, the mindset side of it is definitely relevant for me.
And I'd really like to say something important around that, because I've also listened to that episode not too long ago. When seeking help, my biggest thing would be make sure that you're going to someone who's a professional. Along this journey, at the very beginning, I lost myself to what I would probably now call fitfluencers, or influencers online trying to give a message about health, which can actually be dangerous. During the very early stages of what we were talking about that I experience now, I was following a fitness coach online and going with their workouts every single day. And I look back now and it was not healthy for me at all. So yes, your episode with Kat's amazing, and it's just finding someone who is qualified to speak about these things, such as Kat, and not listening to people who are trying to give unsolicited advice online.
Yeah, brilliant. I think I'd love to touch on that with you in a minute in terms of like how more isn't better in your relationship with exercise, because I think that's obviously really important to discuss. In terms of like your mindset around when I'm like, hey Victoria, we need to eat slightly more calories and maybe exercise slightly less and potentially even put on a little bit of weight, which obviously it was not as black and white a conversation as that. Hopefully I said it much better in terms of being, what's the word I'm looking for? Just mindful of obviously where you were at in terms of hearing that message. But essentially that was the message. It's like, okay, you want to get your cycle back, you're under eating, overtraining, stressed, and underweight. So there's kind of 4 separate components there, which of course are very interlinked. Like one can cause the next one and have a knock-on effect, but they are slightly different issues. Any one of them can cause a loss in the cycle. So when I basically said that to you, and hopefully not quite as a blunt way, but I was like, hey, we might need to eat a little bit more, exercise a little bit less, and gain a little bit of weight. Do you remember what you thought when I said that? Were you a bit like, oh crap, I'm out? Or were you like, okay, I'm ready to hear that?
I think my first thought is the same answer to any question, is why. And that was...
Yeah, that is so you. That is so you.
Everything that someone says to me or advice, even now, I will say why. But that's where I felt like the growth happened. You then explained exactly why I would have to do those things and the changes that it would make. Before all of this, I never had any idea that by doing excessive exercise, I would lose my cycle. I didn't even know the connection between the two of them. And similarly with stress, we all have stress in our lives, and some of it is, as I've heard, good, but I would never know that a really excessive amount of it would make me lose my cycle. I didn't know the connection between them. So when you first said that, I was like, okay, why? And once you had told me why, I'd be like, okay, now I can think about doing that because I can see the end goal. At first, those all things separately didn't sound like they were going to make a big change, but yeah, once I'd understood and you'd shown me, there's so much research, obviously you know more of this than I, but there's so much research on it, and you'd shown me befores and afters and how you'd worked with other people to do the same thing. So it was understanding the reasons behind what you were telling me to do, for sure, that changed it.
Oh, I love that answer. I think, the reason I like laughed a little bit a minute ago is because Victoria is definitely loves a why, which I love as a coach. And I think, quick tangent on that for any coaches listening, there is definitely a trend in the industry, especially with more bodybuilding coaches, where it's like, just do what I say. And I think that because a lot of coaches in the industry are coached by other coaches, they then learn that, they think that's okay. And I'm not saying it's not okay, but it's different. But for a lot of people like yourself, if I had just been like, we're going to 1,500 calories from 1,200, like shut up and just do it, you probably would have told me to piss off. And then I would have been like, well, why have I lost this client? And ultimately I wouldn't have been able to help you, and you wouldn't have got the help you needed. So for any coaches listening, especially I think if you're a guy and the client's female, especially if it's like a sensitive topic or a sensitive goal, you do need to like definitely back it up. And people are going to want different levels of that. I think you've got some pretty long voice notes and I think there was some links. I'm a big fan of using female doctors in particular to kind of back up points in terms of like, here's an article or here's a podcast or whatever, right? But yeah, definitely kind of back that up with the why are you doing these things? Because as you've said, I think most people, and I take it for granted, I think you've said you take it for granted now, most people don't know that much. They don't understand, as you've just said, they don't understand how these things are connected. They're like, that seems minuscule, or that doesn't seem relevant. But when it's explained, it's like, well, that isn't that minuscule, that is relevant, that's connected like this. Or even if they are small things individually, like they compound, right, and add up, and eventually that bucket overspills, so to speak.
And I think linked to what I said before about seeing people doing certain things online, I think the difference about having a personalised coach and going to somebody specifically to deal with your issue, which I completely appreciate is not accessible to all, and I think that's a whole other conversation, but is having somebody that works with you, with your body. There is so many things online now about how many calories I should be eating a day, how many calories other people are eating a day, or how many workouts they're doing. It just didn't work for me. I'm 5'11.5". I'm a completely different body build to the person who's saying that they're only eating, I'm not even going to say it because I hate to put any pointers out there, but said amount of calories. It just doesn't work for my body. So I think, you've got to go to the right people for education and accept a personalised approach that's going to work for you and not just maybe 50% of the women out there.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's really great advice. There's a lot of people in the fitness industry. Some are really open about it, which is great. And others I only know because I know them behind closed doors. But we're talking about women in their 20s that are on HRT, they're infertile. So yeah, I definitely think it's important not to be looking to a lot of those influencers, as you've touched on, to be like the pinnacle of health and let's copy their advice. And I know you aren't going to say this about yourself, so I'll say it if that's okay. But you are very hardworking. Like, you were doing a lot. You were at university, first class law degree, graduated top of your uni, and you were doing 2 jobs. So you were very active, like a lot of steps and a lot of stress. And I think a lot of the time, obviously that's relevant for a lot of people, they're under a lot of stress, of course, but it's not relevant actually for a lot of PTs or coaches who often like are quite young, often are living at home, and I'll be the first one to say coaching can actually be quite difficult and quite stressful, but they're not necessarily always at uni working 2 jobs, working late hours, doing loads of like excessive other stressors. So yeah, obviously a lot of that information just wasn't relevant to where you were at.
Yeah, and even things like steps, right? We hear so much about it online. Everyone's saying that we should do the magic number. Something like that, again, didn't work for me. But I would look online, I'd see all these people saying, go out and do this many steps, go out and do that many steps. It just doesn't work like that, especially when, like you say, you're under different stresses. And even when I was not having a period, which terrifies me the most, the doctors didn't even pick up on the fact that I was slightly underweight. And that worries me. That's why taking a personalised approach, if you can, is so important. They were telling me to still exercise. I needed to keep my body moving, which just kind of blows my mind.
Yeah. I mean, you were doing like 20, 30,000 steps some days, right, with the waitressing. I remember them being like crazy high.
Yeah, and I think this breaks what I experienced into 2 as well. There was the really intentional part where I wanted to look a certain way and I was working towards that goal. But then there are other parts that weren't so intentional, for example, like doing lots of steps. So, yeah, when I explain the way that I lost it, I'm like, actually, maybe it is to do with the stress that was happening on the side as well. But that's why I think it's a really complex conversation. And some people come to me and say, look, I don't have my period. I know you might have experienced similar things, but I can't understand why I'm really living a healthy lifestyle and I'm not doing anything excessive. So I think, yeah, that would be the importance of going to see someone who's more personalised and can take your whole situation and listen to you and take the time to understand what's going on.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think this is massively oversimplified, but one way people can think about it, which I think is quite useful, is the majority of health advice out there isn't necessarily health advice, it's weight loss advice. And if you are overweight, then subsequently it's health advice. But if you are maybe not necessarily underweight, but you're in a normal weight range, or you're underweight, but you've got an additional health issue that could be related to stress and calorie intake, such as no menstrual cycle, then that same health advice is actually unhealthy advice. So just knowing that where that advice is coming from, like who it's aimed at and what end, it's kind of a continuum, right? Like being overweight is unhealthy. Don't know if I can even say that at the moment, but hopefully the podcast listeners to this are like, yeah, loyal and they're not going to like grasp me up. But like one end of the spectrum is like, if you're overweight, that's unhealthy. If you're underweight and you haven't got a menstrual cycle, that's also unhealthy. And then health is in the middle, right? It occurs on a continuum. So it's just about knowing like what end of that continuum are you on. But unfortunately for anyone listening to this, they're probably on the underweight or normal weight but lost their menstrual cycle side. But the majority of health advice is for the complete other end of that continuum, which is people that are overweight and they're trying to improve their health by reducing body fat percentage, which is then just the opposite advice for someone like yourself.
Yeah, and I think also when it comes to education, it's kind of also being partly accountable for what you're consuming. So obviously I was lucky enough to have a coach and have that advice, but if you're not in that place, there are some really amazing spaces that exist online where you can feel more confident to explore gaining weight or seeing people in different bodies. So much of what we are fed through the media and marketing is, one size body, and it's terrifying. But there are these really nice spaces online where people are celebrating all different body types, and I think that's really important. Obviously losing your cycle isn't always due to an intention like this, but for those that it is, there are definitely these spaces available online, so don't feel alone in what you're experiencing.
Yeah, such a good point. I think that what you just kind of alluded to there a little bit is actually really interesting. So there was about 5 or 6 podcast guests that all kind of said the same thing, which is like, you should consider doing a social media detox in terms of there might be some people that you're following that don't serve you in terms of reinforcing bad habits or reinforcing a certain body image. And it was, Diddy, Sammy, Holly, Kat and Amelia off the top of my head have all said like one of the first things they'll have clients do, and I do as well, is you'll be like, okay, like what accounts are we maybe following that actually aren't serving you, and we need to maybe be mindful of what you're consuming.
I think that's really important. So that is, if anyone says to me I'm struggling or can you point me in the right direction for help, I would say firstly, something that I experienced, obviously I can't give any advice, but something that I experienced was changing what I'm following online. But alongside that, I think the bigger step for me, and this was actually easier when I was working within a creative industry such as the fashion industry or the beauty or the modelling industry, was seeing that what exists online is not real. So I can kind of detach myself from Instagram to some sense, because I can see what goes on behind the scenes to create this one image that looks absolutely fantastic. And Instagram's a whole other ball game, right? But yeah, I think if you can't bring yourself to kind of follow or unfollow people online, definitely take a step back from Instagram in general or any social media platform and think what's going on in your life right now is so much more important than what people think is going on or what you think is going on in other people's lives, because it usually isn't the case.
Yeah. No, I think that's really great advice. It's surprisingly hard to do, but it is really, really important. When my Instagram account got deleted, I think that was the most still and peaceful few weeks of my life, because it took me a while to decide if I even wanted to make another one. So yeah, it's really important.
I agree. And I think, yeah, if we show up more in real life for the people that we want to be, then online life comes a little less important, but yeah, easier to manage.
Oh, I like that. That was great. Let's quote you in the show.
Apologies, maybe off tangent.
No, that was nice. Yeah, I love that. You just came up with that, didn't you?
Yeah, of course.
That was so good.
Copyright.
Yeah, I love that. That was beautifully put. Let's talk a little bit about your relationship with exercise, if that's okay, because something that you've touched on already, and I'm definitely guilty of forgetting that not everyone understands this, is that more isn't better. So yeah, just throughout this process, in terms of the start, where you're at now, tell me a little bit about your relationship with exercise, the style of training that you do, how much, etc.
Okay. Where I'm at now, just kind of as an end goal, is I adore exercise. I always have done. I grew up as a dancer, so movement has always been a really, really important part of my life. And it's fine when it's for fun, or, you're working towards a certain goal, but I would say that it probably become a bit obsessive, and that is when the problem occurred. And yeah, so during the point where I was excessively exercising, again, I won't give a ballpark number because I don't want to plant any seeds in anyone's mind who might be struggling right now, but I was doing really excessive HIIT exercise, and that was through following the wrong influences online. And yeah, I was doing that several times a day, and as well as all the other things that I was told I should be doing, like we said, walking, eating healthily, and that persisted for quite a few months. And when I reached out for help, I realised that there are so many other exercises I could and should be doing, such as lifting weights or not so much cardio or intensive exercise. So that was kind of how it was back then. And now I see exercise as a completely different part of my life. It's something that I do because I enjoy it. It's not necessarily for a fitness goal. I do so many different modalities of exercise now, and I feel really lucky to have explored lots of different ones, especially through my work. So I understand that I am privileged to have explored that, but there are so many different types and forms of exercise available, and not just for physical health but also mental health as well. So I think I had to take a step back from exercise. I remember you saying to me you can't do spinning, and that terrified me because I was spinning a lot. So yeah, I think just really evaluating the reason that I was using exercise was what changed it for me, and understanding the impact that exercise was having, because we're told that exercise is so good for you and you should do more of it, and we should be moving more, but sometimes it's not better to move more. In fact, you no more exercise and you're eating a lot more. And that was really difficult to accept, not only because it had become part of my routine, but also mentally. I was told that this, magic bullet exercise was really, really good for me, and then I had to stop it. And that was really tricky.
Yeah. Sorry about that. I think that, as Victoria said, but just to be super clear on, it does depend on how much over-exercising was contributing to why you lost your cycle. Like Victoria's was very excessive. Typically, we don't need to remove it completely. I think there was still a little bit of gentle strength training a couple of times a week, but that was it. For someone else listening, you might be training 3 times a week. Again, I don't want to ask Victoria's done throughout this, which is really well done, is not put numbers on things, but it's unlikely that 3 times a week is going to be overtraining for most people. So it's a pretty safe number to use. That's an example, is 3. If you are training 3 times a week and you've lost your cycle, reducing that might not be as beneficial as it was for Victoria in terms of getting it back, or might not be beneficial at all. So it really depends on where you're at. But yeah, if it was excessive like Victoria, we need to bring it right down. There's nothing evil about spin, but the problem with high intensity classes can just be that competitive nature. If you were going to turn up and kind of work at 50 or 60%, that might not be as detrimental, but who does that in a class environment, right? So yeah, I appreciate that was really difficult to do, and but you did it. You heard a bit of advice that you didn't really want to hear, and you did it. So well done.
Thank you again. I think it wasn't easy to do, and I think every single day you have to fight with yourself to not carry on these behaviours that have been normalised in your lives. But I think the way to look around that was I decided that I wanted this to change, and I kept looking back every day to the notes that I'd made or your research that you had provided, saying this is going to help and this is why. So always having that there was really helpful, a reference point to be I am en route to something that's better than the position that I'm in now. Because every day was so different. Sometimes I remember I'd storm out the house and be I'm going for a run. And just bringing it back the next day and being okay, that happened yesterday, but today I'm going to pull it back. And yeah, seeing more and more evidence of people doing the same thing and it working for them was really helpful. So anecdotally looking out to other people in the same space or doing the same thing was really helpful.
Yeah, that's great advice. I know this next point, but it's just popped into my mind. I know this one wasn't really relevant to you, but with a few other female clients and friends who are doing a lot of exercise and they've lost their cycle, or they maybe haven't quite lost it, but it's very irregular. There's issues like they're on their way to losing it. And when they've kind of opened up and been honest with me, the exercises, because they're like, we don't really have anything else to do. They are in situations where they've maybe moved to a different city, like after university or for a job or whatever it might be, right? And they don't really feel like they have that many friends, and they need to exercise every evening because they just kind of feel a little bit lost without it from like a routine standpoint or a social standpoint. It might be like going to the CrossFit box, or they might be running with a friend. And that's, yeah, just something I wanted to acknowledge really, because until a few women had said that to me, I never even really thought of like, oh yeah, because like obviously for me, I love exercise and I do feel lost without it, but for different reasons, not because I'd be sitting there by myself bored because I hate my own company or because I don't have friends because I'm in a new city. So I heard that a few times, and it was just another great example of, I think often as a male, there's things that you just don't even appreciate or could comprehend that a woman might be going through. So yeah, for anyone listening that's like, I love exercise because it's kind of how I do my social, or I just don't like being in my own company, or I'm in a new environment where I don't know people yet, so exercise is kind of what I do to pass some time. Like, yeah, I hear you. I know that's difficult.
I agree. And I think, yeah, I just had to take a step back and be like, what am I doing this exercise for? Is it because I really enjoy boxing or whatever I was doing that day, or is it because I'm just literally trying to find a route to, without saying the words, achieve a really unhealthy goal? So I think I just evaluated the reason why I was doing exercise, and out the other end of it, I was like, I don't even like half these exercises I'm doing. I've just read online that they're going to help me achieve a certain body weight or a certain body size, and that's the reason I was doing them. I hated doing half the exercises I was doing, whereas now I do so many different types of exercise that hardly even move, right? A meditation class, I don't know whether you'd even call it exercise, or a yoga class, I love it, and I hardly ever move, and people are like, oh, that you're not going to burn any calories. That's unimportant to me now. Obviously, if I needed to do that, there'd be other classes that I'd go to and do, but really evaluating the reason why I was exercising and whether I even enjoyed that exercise was a really important part of my journey.
Yeah, brilliant. I think that was going to be my next question, is kind of what could you replace it with? But as you've already touched on there, I think meditation and yoga classes are two brilliant examples.
Yeah, and part of when I was experiencing this actually was in lockdown, so I was sat in my own company 24/7. And maybe that is why the exercising got quite excessive, because there actually was nothing else to do and all you had was people on the TV telling you to go and exercise for an hour outside. But also I think, like you were saying about community, I had to ensure that the community of people that I was surrounding myself with through my recovery journey was people that were helpful towards the goal that I was aiming towards, because obviously everyone in the fitness space is doing their own thing, and that's really fine, and that's how it should be. But when you follow the journey of other people through the fitness space, you kind of jump on their train, and maybe that isn't beneficial for you. And equally, during lockdown, I remember moving back in with my family, and that's when I realised that a lot of the behaviours that I was showing were actually unhealthy. I'd lived on my own or with friends before that, and living a really fast life in London, you are in your own little bubble and you follow your own routine. And then I remember moving back in with my family, and that was really a huge part of me realising that what I was doing wasn't actually in the right direction. I remember them all sitting down at dinner time or being like, why are you exercising so much? Why are you doing this? It's the evening, come watch a show with us. And that's when I was like, wow, my life really is unhealthy. So really surrounding yourself with the right people towards the goal that you're heading towards was, yeah, something I personally anecdotally would recommend, because that was a huge part of the healing journey for me.
Knowing now what you know, in hindsight, those, I think 2 times you messaged me being like, I want to do a little diet. Would you say upon reflection, and you might not have an answer to this, but upon reflection, would you say that that was a bit of a lapse in terms of your journey and where you were at? Or do you feel like actually you ended up with a little bit more body fat than you wanted? Or actually was it that it hadn't changed, but your mindset around how you looked had changed?
Okay. I think I understand what you're saying. So the word diet rings alarm bells in my mind, but we will run with it because I understand that under a controlled space, it's the right thing to be doing. But I would say that is because mentally I no longer really elate my body image with a diet. So before I'd probably be like, let's diet, I'm going to really crash and do it all and do it really, really aggressively. Now, no, I would be like, okay, I still think it's okay to take control of your own body and want to lose some body fat and create a different shape for yourself. I think that's totally fine, as long as the intention behind that is really is a good one, as long as you're not abusing your body, which is exactly what I did for years. So I think when I've reached out, I've probably thought about it a lot more than before, when I would have said to someone, please, can I do this diet? I really need to lose loads of weight. So when I think of a diet now, I think of something that is sustainable in the right hands of a coach like yourself, whereas before, I will not mention what or which, but I have done a myriad of things that would probably be on the diet shelf at Holland & Barrett, and that would have really, really wrecked my body. Whereas now, if I was to ask, I think even reaching out to a coach first and foremost to say, can you support me in this goal I have? I would say it would be nothing like the mindset I had before. It would be more of, I know what I'm doing, I know where I want to get to. I'm asking you for the help with that because I would really like to make sure it's safe and sustainable and doesn't go too far. So I think using that method to get to a certain body shape, if that's what you're aiming for, or if it's for other medical reasons, I felt fine in doing. I don't want to give advice, so basically I think that could be fine, but if it's with ill intention, that's when I started to worry. And reaching out to you, if I was like, okay, yeah, I'd like to diet, but it's with ill intention, I'd pull myself back and be like, that is not the right thing for me to be doing right now. But I also think it's fine to take the decision to do those things if you're in the right headspace to do so, which I believe I was when I asked you to.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, spot on. I'm glad that obviously that is where you were at, but I'm always here for you if you ever message that, and I don't think that's where it's the place that it's coming from. I'll be sure to let you know. So
I think that's a really important thing about having a coach, and I keep coming back to it, and it's something that I advocate in the whole of my work life, is really being guided by professionals who have your best interest at heart. I think what I've learned from what I now do within the wellness space is that this is people, coaches also need to earn a living, so they need clients, but it's ensuring that you're going with people that are working with you, not against you, and making sure that they've got the right end goal for you, as opposed to just seeing you as their money-making machine. Yeah,
I've had to make a lot of tough decisions over the years, turning down people's money at times when could have kind of done with it, to be honest. But just, they either weren't ready to do what needed to be done in terms of they wanted to lose weight, but they were no two situations are the same, but the short version is, imagine Victoria's situation, but wanting to lose weight, right? You can't take that person's money, or they just weren't in my skill set. So yeah, it's hard, but you need to do the right thing.
And I think personally, the thing that I learned from this is that if I were to ever seek a coach again, or the coaches that I work with, I ensure that they also are looking out for my mindset as well as the physical change that I'm desiring, if it is one, or if it's just to explore new forms of exercise or try something new. So yeah, really ensuring that they've got my mindset at the back of their heart as well. And I think that's what you said about screening. That to me is so important when it comes to fitness and people taking on clients.
Yeah, perfect. I think, for any coaches listening, obviously there always is quite a few, which is awesome, and thank you for that. Then I think hopefully it's great to hear from a client off a coach how important that is to you, and therefore if you're not already doing that, then that's the proof that it is incredibly valuable and it doesn't go unnoticed. I'd love to know a little bit more about like your future work and plans around what you're looking to do in this space, because I think that's really interesting. But before we get onto that, is there anything else you'd like to say to kind of like round off and close the conversation in terms of the journey you've been on? Like anything now that's come into your mind that you've gone, I would have liked to have said that or added that, or just kind of any closing thoughts for anyone listening that is where you were 3, 4, 5 years ago?
Oh gosh, where would I start? I could sit here and rant about it all day. Education. I will always preach the same thing. It's exactly why I do my job now. It's exactly why I hope to do my job for a very long time. And that basically, I don't think I even introduced myself, was I host events to educate and empower people about wellness through wellness professionals and practitioners to ensure that they can access safe information as opposed to that which is online. I think education's a huge one. It's taking slight accountability as well for yourself, and doing your own research. Following your gut with your doctors and your practitioners. Really listen to your body, or learn your body even. And please stay really mindful to what you see online and the impact of diet culture and body image and all of the above. It is huge, and I really hope, I know you've asked about my future, that is where I see a lot more of my education going, is to ensuring that girls and men, which is equally important and is such a big issue at the moment, don't become victim to what they see online or what they feel like they should look like. The fitness industry should no longer just be about aesthetics, and that is changing. I'm really positive. This sounds really derogatory, but there is a lot changing, but there is still such a way to go. So I think educate yourself about yourself, but also from the right place.
Yeah, I mean, such great advice. And obviously I'm here for all of those points. In terms of moving forwards, I know we've had lots of conversations over the years about a career, which I've always loved having with you. And I'm so proud and so inspired to see what you're now doing, knowing that you weren't doing it what feels like not that long ago when we were in Brighton having these conversations. So it's amazing to see. What do the next few years look like?
Oh gosh, God knows. More education, more spreading the word. I think I come from a legal background, which you know, so that is a huge part in my heart. I didn't turn out to be a lawyer, which much to the sadness of my family, I'm sure, but I think, yeah, more regulation is what I would love to see, and would love to use my degree to support in that. I'm now in an industry that I adore, health, wellness, fitness. I love it, but it can be super dangerous. It's your health and it's your wellness at the end of the day. It's not like working in the fashion industry where it was more fun and I could have more fun with it. Now I am not a coach. Right now I can't give medical advice, but I'm really passionate about ensuring that people access the right advice. So hopefully the future holds more empowering, more education, spreading the word. And just helping people who deserve it sing from the rooftops about what they can do to help people's health.
Yay. That makes me happy. It hasn't really crossed paths too much yet, other than this podcast and other than just personally catching up and the advice that you've given me. But I hope that on more of a professional brand business level that those roads cross over the next few years. So yeah, I'm excited for you.
Thank you. Me too. And I'm always here if you ever need me.
I know. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to that in terms of just rounding it off and closing thoughts, or maybe where can people find out a little bit about you, maybe on your LinkedIn, or I don't know if you're posting on there at the moment?
I am on LinkedIn, but I don't think I've posted on there in a while. I'll probably get in trouble for that. I spend most of my time on Instagram, which is at Vic Smart, and I run the Beauty Triangle alongside Francesca, which is at _beauty_triangle, and we host events, wellness events. We have a blog online and lots more, and we have very excitingly just hosted our first wellness festival. So there are very big plans for that coming up as well. So if you wanted to have a little look on there, you are more than welcome to one of our events. I would love to see you there, host some of those as well. And a last piece of closing advice, my big word would be compassion. Please just learn to love yourself a little bit more, and do what's right for your body and for your mind, as opposed to what you think other people see from the outside.
Yeah, that's so good. I love it, Victoria. Thank you so much. Obviously, third time, because I actually cancelled on you the first time, didn't I? I was ill, and then we tried a second time, and now here we are. So third time lucky, and you've absolutely nailed it.
Oh, bless you. You're very kind. Thank you so much. It's been honestly such a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was so good. If you've enjoyed today's episode, it would be amazing if you could do us a massive favour and leave us a review, and even if possible, a comment. The reason why this is so useful for us is it allows us to know which type of content and which guests are best going to be relevant for you and your goals, so that we can continue to make the podcast even better for you in the future. Thank you so much so far for all of your support on the Women's Wellness Show. If you've enjoyed today's episode, it would be amazing if you could do us a massive favour and leave us a review, and even if possible, a comment. The reason why this is so useful for us is it allows us to know which type of content and which guests are best going to be relevant for you and your goals, so that we can continue to make the podcast even better for you in the future. Thank you so much so far for all of your support on the Women's Wellness Show.